Today on the Astra Show, we will be discussing tapes that have recently come out regarding a conversation Reagan had with Nixon. Then, we will be discussing the Democratic debate which happened earlier this week and be discussing who is the winner, who are the losers, and who is going to make it to the next debate stage. Finally, we will be discussing the Capital One hack with special guest contributor. I'm Andy Ramirez, and this is the Astra Show. Newly discovered Reagan tapes. So, Tim Naftali, a clinical associate professor of history at NYU, posted on The Atlantic Reagan's hidden racist conversation with Richard Nixon, where he basically called African delegates to the United Nations monkeys. Now, I get it. I understand. It looks horrible. It is. And it's not right to call people this. But we need to understand that comments like this do not reflect the person in their entirety. The left has totally brought this back up as conservative racism, and now some articles are drawing parallels between Reagan because he's a TV star and Trump because he's a TV star. This is absolutely absurd and a gross misrepresentation of current presidents and past presidents. Just because Reagan said one thing and made one thing that he probably shouldn't have said, and he probably regrets saying it, people are going to freak out about it and just going to say, oh, he's a racist. Let's totally forget any policy he did for civil rights. Let's forget all of that. But he's a racist because he said one thing. Looking at the income, according to black demographics, at the end of the Reagan era, there was a wealthy and black upper class. In fact, much of the poor middle class from the 1980s moved up into the working and middle class from 35,000 to 100,000. The original percentage of working poor and working class started at 30% and moved to 25% in 1990, where 40% of the population of African Americans were now working and middle class, 8%, a 3% increase from 1980, whereas now upper middle class, and 0.7, a newly born wealthy and upper middle class was born during the Reagan era. And let's also not forget what Reagan did for illegal immigrants. Reagan was a president that will always be remembered for his amnesty. And people say that he regretted it later on. But that's only because that he knew after the fact that it would increase illegal immigration. It's the same thing with the border situation going on right now. I believe that we should build a wall and then do a DREAM Act, a clean DREAM Act. Because if we just do a DREAM Act, then there is no way that we can ensure more illegal immigrants come in unsecurely. And I think a wall is necessary to prevent that. And we should expedite the legal way. It's much safer and vastly better for people. Reagan's 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act said that it was one of the most unlike immigration reform acts of the past 20th century. Amnesty wasn't the pitfall. We used the word legalization. Former Wyoming Senator Alan K. Simpson tells NPR. And everyone fell asleep slightly for a while, and we were able to do legalization. The law granted amnesty to nearly 3 million illegal immigrants. 3 million people were legalized under Reagan. And he's a racist for one small comment? This is absurd. People need to know what they actually did. Policies and rhetoric are totally different things. What Trump says about Baltimore is different from his policies on Baltimore. Trump is literally trying to invite to help Baltimore. And while it may be crude, his rhetoric is poor. He's led to action. His rhetoric on North Korea was terrible. He called him Kim Jong-un Rocket Man. But he got us to talks. He's a man of action, at least. And his policies are different from what he says, which is what really matters. Now, of course, people say that Reagan is the father of modern conservatism, but anytime he does something good, like the amnesty, people immediately say, oh, well, he's different from Republicans. So what is it? Is he the father of modern conservatism, or is he an off-branch of conservatism? He can't be both. Leftists try to pick and choose the good from Republicans and try to push it onto their side. But in reality, Republicans are trying to do good. A lot of Republicans are. And I'm not saying all Republicans are perfect, because certainly they're not. And I'm not saying all Democrats are evil, because I believe Democrats and Republicans have tried to make policies that they believe will improve the country, but just in a different way. However, we can't forget the good Republicans have done for this country. And the left is just trying to steal all the credit from it and say that, oh, it's ours, and he was more liberal, really, than we really assumed. But that's not the case at all. When the amnesty took, leftists immediately try to say that Reagan was taking a more progressive move. But that's really just his modern conservatism at play. The leftists just can't try to steal credit for no reason. And Reagan was incredibly popular. That just goes to show that even in elections he was incredibly popular in what we did. He won in landslide victories. And just one small comment that he said is apparently supposed to destroy his legacy. It's absolutely absurd. But it's not like the Democratic Party has changed much in terms of name-calling and accusations, as now we can see that that's even turning into their own party, which leads me to the debates. Now, according to the New York Times, and an article written by Maggie Astor, the 8 candidates that have met the qualifications and are guaranteed a spot to move on are Joe Biden, Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. But the best person who can stand up to Trump is Biden. He's the middle, and he's also leading in polls. And he survived this match. A lot of people were expecting him to just lose energy and fizzle out, but he kept energy throughout the entire debate, for most of it until near the end. And then he started to fizzle out, especially when he tried to do his whole little calling card of, oh, go to Joe at 303030, because he doesn't understand. And it's fine, but he loses popularity with that. He just looks silly, and he lost energy from that. But I still think he's the best performing candidate on there. And let's go to someone on the totally extreme side of the Democratic aisle. We have moderate Biden, but now we have crazy socialist Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders cannot compete against Trump because of the fact that he's so radical, and people are moving away from socialism even in the Democratic Party. We've seen what happens in Venezuela. We've seen what happened in Cuba. The Latino vote, the Cuban vote in states like Florida were massively in favor of Trump because they saw what socialism was like. And it's just absolutely absurd, the fact that Bernie Sanders thinks he can do things. And also, Bernie Sanders is incredibly out of touch. Bernie Sanders is trying to put the blame on millionaires and billionaires, but in the fact, he has 3 homes, including a lake house. Like, what? Are you exempt from this stuff too? Like, Bernie Sanders, if you were so caring, why don't you let people live in your homes? You don't live in all 3. There's only one Bernie Sanders. You can't live in 3 homes at once, so why don't you let people live in your home if you're so caring? If you care about the people, if you really care about the working class, poor people on the streets, why don't you let people stay in your house, Bernie Sanders? But someone similar and who's trying to steal Bernie Sanders' fire is Elizabeth Warren. Now, Elizabeth Warren is actually born in Oklahoma, but she moved to Massachusetts and is now a senator of Massachusetts. Elizabeth Warren, I think, has no chance, and I think she was definitely a loser in the debates so far. Elizabeth Warren is she's made a fool of herself with the whole Pocahontas thing, how she's literally 1 in 1,024th Cherokee. Like, even if you look optimistically at Warren's policies, there are people who can probably implement her policies even better. Even I'll admit, Bernie could probably implement her plans much better. Because at least Bernie knows more about the idea of socialism. And even though it doesn't work, at least he knows more about how to implement it than Elizabeth Warren would. Elizabeth Warren would make socialism a bad thing even worse. And for a multitude of her policy ideas, from reparations to just the idea of getting rid of private health care, which we will go in depth on each issue eventually. Elizabeth Warren has totally ostracized herself from moderate Democrats and conservatives. She has proven herself to totally given up on the moderate field. Radicals cannot win in this. That's why I think Biden is the best choice. Biden can't keep pushing for socialism because he thinks that's the next thing, revolution. Biden thinks he just wants to move forward in a more progressive, more government-regulated, more government-intrusive program. While Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren want a totally government-controlled system in terms of healthcare and in terms of business. And why I think Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are definitely on the losing end, at least in terms of major popular candidates on the stage. Kamala Harris also had some mess-ups. Her opening statement at the debate was silly. She stumbled over her words. She could have done better. She laughed it off, which is fine. It shows character, but for presidential debates, it's important to be as stoic as possible, but also have to have personality. And she showed personality, but it wasn't serious. And Kamala Harris just kind of bumbling over her lines and not really having a clear policy idea. It just really did not work well for her. Here are some highlights of my favorite moments of the debates.
Maybe if I could have had 3 minutes instead of 60 seconds or 30 seconds or 15 seconds, that would have, if I could have done things differently, that would have certainly been one of my choices.
For senior citizens, it will finally include dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses.
But you don't know
Second
that.
of all,
You don't know that,
second
Bernie.
of all,
We'll come to you in a second,
I do know,
Congressman.
and I wrote the damn bill.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
Now, on to something a little more scary and frightening for your credit. Capital One was hacked, and over 100 million Capital One credit card applications and accounts were hacked by a hacker named Paige Thompson. Now, according to CNN in an article written by Rob McLean, Paige Thompson was able to break into a Capital One server and gained access to 140,000 social security numbers and 1 million Canadian social insurance numbers and 80,000 bank account numbers, in addition to an undisclosed number of people's names, addresses, credit scores, credit limits, balances, and other information. This is incredibly scary, and it just goes to show that in this day and age, hackers are stronger than they ever were. White hat hackers are typically hired by businesses to find exploits so the businesses can fix them. But black hat hackers have no incentive to do that because they're not employed by the business. In fact, they feel like they can make more money hacking illegally. So that's what happens. It seems like Thompson had no malicious intent. She never tried to get any money out of it. And that she... And in the article it goes to show that no credit card account numbers or login credentials were compromised, and 99% of social security numbers were not compromised. So it seems the majority of people should not worry about this. But the fact that one person could orchestrate this is scary for cybersecurity. Capital One said it expects to incur between $100 million and $150 million in costs relating to the hack, including customer notifications, credit monitoring, tech costs, and legal support. And then Capital One stock was down 5% in trading on this Tuesday. A little history about Thompson. Apparently she worked for Amazon beforehand, and the servers for Capital One are next to Amazon, so she had easy access into Capital One servers. And the firewall she was easily able to bypass, apparently. And then, according to an article by the New York Times written by Emily Flitter and Karen Weiss, Paige Thompson left a trail online because she was apparently bragging about how she hacked into Capital One and got court documents in Seattle, and she was arrested and charged with 1 count of computer fraud and abuse. Ms. Thompson, who formerly worked for Amazon Web Services, which hosted the Capital One database that was breached, was not shy about her work as a hacker. She is listed as the organizer of a group on Meetup, a social network called Seattle Juarez Kids, described as gathering for anybody with appreciation for distributing systems, programming, hacking, and cracking. Now, she basically knew she was going to get caught. She knew it. So the exact reason for why she did it is unclear. But the fact that she was able to do it at all is scary. And in fact, here's a take from a Astra Show contributor, Jay Samuel. On to you, Samuel.
Thank you so much, Andy. It is great to be on the show. So, there have been several cybersecurity concerns in the news this week. The U.S. government issued a statement saying that small airplanes are in danger of being hacked. Google found a bunch of security issues with the iPhone and the Messenger app, and Apple has neglected to fix these issues. But by far the biggest tech concern of the week is that Capital One got hacked. This is a really big deal because Capital One is one of the biggest financial organizations in the United States right now. What's in your wallet? Capital One lost private information for over 100 million customers. 140,000 social security numbers have been stolen. This is obviously a very concerning deal for anyone who has an account at Capital One. But what's especially concerning about this is that one 33-year-old woman orchestrated all of this hacking by herself. She got past all of the encryption, all of Capital One's security mechanisms with ease. So this raises the question, are any banks safe from the threat of being hacked? To be more expansive, is anyone safe from hackers? Well, according to a recent article by the Wall Street Journal, we're not safe now, and we're about to get even more less safe. Even unsafer. Let me explain. Let me mansplain. Banks and other online services use a process called encryption to keep their data secure. If a hacker is able to download data from the bank, he or she is unable to read it because the data is encrypted. It's like a code. But here's the thing. While it's relatively difficult for today's conventional computers to break through the code of encryption, a quantum computer could break through this encryption code in a matter of seconds. Quantum computers are capable of exposing every ounce of secure data in the world. Now, you may be thinking, quantum computers are still a long way off. Well, if that's what you're thinking, you're wrong. Actually, China has launched a massive project to develop quantum computing, and they're making progress really fast. In fact, China has the potential to develop quantum computers within the next 3 years. 3 years. So basically, within the next 3 years, China will be able to hack into anything they want. And our relationship with China is Although several US companies like Google and Microsoft are working to create adequate defenses to defend against the threat of quantum computer hacking, so far all these efforts are still a long way off. So the bottom line is this, none of your data is secure. So back to the studio with optimism, this is Samuel Oakes signing off.
Thank you, Samuel, for that. It just goes to show that we should be very careful with our personal information, especially our financial information. But that's it for the Astra Show today. Thank you so much for watching.